Hello, this is number 5. Boy in his Bible here again, and we're doing now number 5. This is again credited as a psalm of David, and it may well be, of course, there's elements in it that would point to a later period, as you will see. He starts off by saying, listen to me, God. He quite often does this. He wants to talk to God. Listen to me, give ear to me. And it goes on into that. He acknowledges that God is his king and is God. Isn't that wonderful? The King David should acknowledge God as his king. And in the first 20 years of his life, you can see that wonderful relationship, the man after God's own heart coming out. Then he talks about those that destroy things. And he says, but as for me, and this is the verse for today, I will come into thy house in the multitude of thy mercy. In thy fear will I worship toward your holy temple. Now, what did that mean? David didn't have a temple in his days or a house in his days. So what does it mean? Well, it seems, and you may want to get some help on this, but my understanding goes like this. As for me, I will come into the presence in the multitude that you are showing to the multitude in your mercy. That's a bit of a paraphrase. You see, when he talks about the house, he's thinking of the presence of God, the home of God. He's got a house in his home. And Moses built a house for God amongst the tribes of Israel. Jesus is building a house for God made out of living bricks that we're told of in both Hebrews and Peter. His awareness of the presence of God is expressed in the word house. So he is saying, I will come into his presence. This reminds me very strongly of Romans chapter 5, when it says that we have entrance into the grace of God, the presence of God's grace, in which we stand and rejoice in hope of the glory of God. And maybe that thought here in the Old Testament is captured for us. And the multitude. First of all, mercy is a multitude. But quite often David would talk of the multitude of the people. He was somehow always surprised that he became king, not only of Judah and Benjamin, but eventually of all the tribes. And he saw them as a multitude that needed God's love and God's grace and God's mercy. And so we have multitudes of mercy to the multitude. And then you have this one, and in thy fear will I worship towards thy holy temple. Now, surely if there's no temple there at that time, what does this mean? Well, quite often the word temple, even when referring to the temple of Solomon, that came much years later, is palace. A palace for God, the best for God, the best you could ever think of. And then he's saying this, I will worship towards thy holy temple, a holy palace. And maybe he is thinking of one day he wants to build the holy palace for God. I don't know. But what I do know, where I'm coming from, I want the presence of God, and I also want the very best of the holiness of the palace of God, and to rejoice in the grace of God. This is Psalm 5 for you today, the Boy in his Bible.